Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us for today's interactive or experiential workshop called Annihilating Anxiety and Starting to Live the Life You Deserve. And this is going to be led by not me, it's going to be led by a very much more skilled facilitator in this regard. We're very fortunate to have with us Sharon Greenspan, who is also an RPCV who served in Ghana from my era, 94 through 97. And she's also a board certified holistic health practitioner who really specializes, she works with a lot with acute anxiety and just helping people, annihilate anxiety, as her term is. And she's going to actually be leading this. And how this workshop came to be is really interesting. I'll share a very short story here. Sharon and I met in another of my webinars where we were talking about self-care in the job search and beyond. And she was a great participant, had some really good advice. And one of her items that she put into the chat box that others really latched onto too was this term, annihilate anxiety. And, we talked a little bit about that. And then after the session, she stayed on and we were chatting and she said, oh, well, this is partly, what I do. That's a term that I use in my work. And so she very graciously offered to facilitate a workshop on this concept of, annihilating anxiety and really, stepping into the life that you deserve. And she's going to be leading it. It's going to be much very interactive. It's going to be, and in terms of, you doing activities. It's not going to be her just talking about what anxiety is and how to treat it. So I think people will really get a lot out of it. So I'm excited to be here. Hopefully you are. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the presenting over to Sharon to take the ball and run with it. So thank you so much, Sharon, for being here with us and for graciously offering to facilitate this workshop. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for coordinating everything, Jody. I'm so pleased to connect with more Peace Corps family, and I'm always happy to serve Peace Corps. I really do consider everyone I serve with, and now I have extended family in Peace Corps. I think the more we help each other, the more we're carrying out the mission of Peace Corps, and we're just creating more peace in the world. That's just what it's about.
Absolutely.
And I'm really happy to make this experiential because I think we're all zoomed out or Zoom fatigue, as Jody was saying when we spoke last night, and nobody just wants to sit and watch slides. So really, the more we all participate, the more we're all going to get from this. So first, I'd like to talk about what this is going to be. So in this hour or 40 minutes we have, I'm going to lead you through about 3 exercises for immediate relief of anxiety. And my intention is to give you a couple of different tools. You may resonate with some more than others, or you may say, oh, well, I think I'm going to try all 3 of them and see which one I really like best. Or you might find that one works better than another in certain situations. So I encourage you to participate, try them all and see what fits and leave the rest. So to kick off, I'd like, first of all, I am screen sharing, right? Okay, great. So to kick off, I'd like to know, what is your anxiety right now? What's the biggest thing that's causing you anxiety? And if you would just go ahead and put that in chat. I've got my chat open on my other monitor. So if you see me turning my head and looking or looking down to type, that's what's going on there. And I just want to know, and I think it's helpful for all of us to just identify, what is our biggest anxiety? Is it the job hunt? Is it how you're going to pay your bills until you get a job? Is it family and friends and divergent opinions about what's going on in the world today? What's going on? Okay. So I see one person has some COVID stress. I'm also experiencing some of that, especially just, friends and family, and it's just such a hot topic these days. So someone is saying, what's going to happen after graduation? How will I get a job? Will I get a job? Which, gosh, I cannot imagine being a graduate in these days. I think it must be enormously challenging. So being far from home and in such a competitive environment. Yes. Yeah, it's hard when you don't have those support systems. And while some other folks are possibly thinking about what their biggest stressors are, deciding if they want to share, I'm also going to encourage folks to open Notepad or a Word document, or maybe you actually still use pen and paper, and have a place where you can take some notes. So if you have questions, I would prefer to take all the questions at the end, so that way I can make sure to get through all of these different techniques. Okay, so a couple of things I'm seeing in here: juggling everyday life. We have so many pieces of life. I see people say living far from aging family. And I can totally relate to that. I just got back from flying across the country to visit an elderly relative. And let me tell you, just flying is usually stressful right now in this day and age. So we have a lot of different stressors, and it's important to know what they are. I think naming them is really important, because then we externalize them. And that's part of the first step when working through this, okay? So again, in this webinar that we're attending, you're going to learn 3 tips or tools for immediate relief. And then we're going to talk about how to really annihilate anxiety. I'm not interested in anybody managing their anxiety, because that means it's still here, we're hanging on to it, we're just like putting it on our to-do list to get to later, and that's not what I want to do with my anxiety. Boom, I want to blow it up and get rid of it. So let's move into these exercises. I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share, and hopefully that will bring us all then into whatever view we're having. I'm having a gallery view so I can see everybody and just be a little more interactive. So first exercise we're going to dive into. I would love for everybody to maybe take their breath, if you want to close your eyes or not. And I want you to tune in and figure out, on a scale of 1 to 10, where is your anxiety level right now? 1 is I'm totally blissed out and life is great. 10 is I'm totally stressed out. Get me out of here. And if you wouldn't mind, just put in chat on that 1 to 10. And if you're really uncomfortable with chat, you can private message. It's important to measure it, because if you don't measure your anxiety, you won't know if the exercise helped you to relieve it or not. So we need to measure at beginning and at end to see where we are. And I'm starting to see some numbers come in. I'm saying 6, maybe 4 to 6, 7-ish. 7. Okay, so we've got some mid to high numbers there. You know, I don't know if it's anxiety. I feel like my energy is probably like at a 3 or 4, just because I'm jazzed up to give this presentation. I kind of get rolling and get excited about this stuff. So that's where I am. Okay, so now we have a measurement for where you are right now. Okay, we're going to do the next part of this. And I'm going to encourage people to take themselves off of mute and participate. We're going to name something that you can see. And I'd like for people to actually give it an adjective. So like right now, first thing I see is my yellow wall. Okay. Let me tell you the whole exercise. We're going to name something you can see, something you can hear, something you can smell, something you can taste, and something you can touch. And what this does is bring us into the present moment. Anxiety usually is about worrying about something that may or may not happen in the future or in the past. So we're going to bring ourselves into the present. So again, I'm going to encourage everybody to take themselves off mute, and we're going to start with the beginning. And I'm just going to say, 1, 2, 3, name something you can see. And if we all say it at the same time, nobody's voice is really going to stand out. So we're not really going to hear what you're saying, but you'll be getting it out there. If you're not comfortable taking yourself off mute, then we'll just see your lips move and I'll know you're participating and being part of this. Okay, so on the count of 3, name something you can see. 1, 2, 3. Picture of an owl.
Cloth.
Okay, on the count of 3, name something you can hear. 1, 2, 3. This webinar.
Your voice.
On the count of 3, name something you can smell. 1, 2, 3. Incense. On the count of 3, name something you can taste. 1, 2, 3. My
Jeez.
breakfast, I just ate. And on the count of 3, name something you can touch. 1, 2, 3. My water
My
bottle.
pants.
Awesome. So now I want you to type in chat, how is your anxiety level? On that 1 to 10 scale, 1 is feeling fine, 10 is stressed out, anxiety. So someone went from a 7 to a 6. Someone went down to a 4. Someone went, let me see if I can see where that person was. Okay, went down a step from like a 6 to a 5. Okay, so we made a teeny bit of progress. And I think that's great. First time doing the exercise, you know, a little bit, it's nerve-wracking being in this group. Everybody's seeing you. Thank you all for saying it out loud. I know that's a little stressful and probably amped up the anxiety a little bit too. So I would encourage you, try that on your own anytime you feel anxiety come up. And it is just that immediate relief because it brings you into the present moment. So the way I think about that when I do it myself is I'm just kind of going from my head down. So it's like something I can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch.
And Sharon, can I just clarify one thing? Because when I was doing the exercise initially, I was thinking that it was maybe supposed to be something that would calm me down, like something positive, you know, like that I should be naming. But it sounds like it's really just bringing you to the present, right? And so whatever you're feeling in the, whatever you're seeing, whatever in the present, not, is that right? So it doesn't have to necessarily be something that calms you. It's just, is that right?
Well, yes to all of it, because actually coming into the present is calming. Again,
Right.
Anxiety happens because we're worrying about something in the future or the past. So by bringing ourselves into the present, there actually is a calming effect to it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, what I meant, and I don't think I was very clear, was when I was doing it, when you would say something you see, I you know, the first thing that would come to mind was maybe just, the a picture window or something that it wasn't necessarily, and I thought, oh, that's not a good example. The TV remote. It's not necessarily something that is a calming thing for me, but it's the first thing.
Right.
It's bringing me to the present. And that's the purpose of this, right? It's just, there's no wrong
Exactly.
answer. There's no right answer. Don't worry about if it's a good answer. It's just whatever you're in touch with in that second.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Because we're not going to go from like stressed out to bliss in one step.
Right.
It's process. So yeah, all that does is get us from being out here to actually being a little bit more in here and in the present moment.
Great. Thank you.
So that's a first step. Thank you for the clarification. So let's dive into exercise number 2. And this is probably going to get us even a little more calmer. So now we have where everyone is starting from. Again, just kind of keep that number in mind. In this exercise, you're actually going to need to be able to breathe through your nose as well. So whatever you need to do to facilitate that right now, if somebody needs to step off camera for a second and go get a tissue, or just make sure that you can breathe through your nose as best as you can. And while anyone is doing that, I'll mention actually nose breathing is really calming for the body. And the more that we breathe well, the calmer our body remains. If you ever watch little babies, they never breathe through their mouth, unless there's a medical reason why they can't breathe through their nose, but babies always breathe through their nose. Okay? So what we're going to do is start by taking a hand, whatever hand you prefer, and let's start with the hang 10, right? So let's just hang loose, chill, okay? Everybody make a hang 10 sign here, okay? Now, so we have our thumb extended and our pinky extended. Go ahead and extend the ring finger. And I know sometimes it's hard just to get that one finger to pop up. The other two want to pop up, but they're not playing in this, okay? Now, I'm going to demonstrate first. And what this is, it's called alternate nostril breathing. In the yoga world, it's called Nodi Shodhana. And the critical piece is we're going to start by breathing through our left nostril. So here's the pattern. I'm going to close the right nostril, inhale through the left. Exhale through the left, inhale through the left, close that left nostril, exhale right, inhale right. Okay. So I'm going to keep talking. We're going to do a couple of rounds of this. So close the right, exhale left, inhale left, close the left, exhale, inhale. And I'm going to lean closer just in case anybody has trouble seeing. Close the right, exhale, inhale, close the left, exhale, inhale, close the right, exhale, inhale, close the left, exhale, inhale, close the right, exhale, and let's release. So release the hand then, and just let your breathing return to usual. You might want to close your eyes and kind of tune in or soften your gaze, and just start to notice how you feel. And when you're ready, just type in chat how your anxiety is right now. Okay, so someone didn't have much of a change. They're still at a 4. Although actually the previous time that person posted, they were closer to 4. So maybe we're a little more of a solid 4 now. Good. Anybody else want to type in or have a feeling of where they are now? Okay, someone went down another notch from 7 to 6 to 5. Great. So again, we only did that for a few seconds. And if you went down one notch in a few seconds, imagine if you actually spent a full minute doing that, or even 2 minutes doing that. Okay. Hi, Karina, glad you joined us. And so that alternate nostril breathing is, for me, one of the most effective ways to calm down. And I'll tell you that when I was a much younger person and was working in a really, really stressful office environment, I would often duck into a bathroom stall and do this alternate nostril breathing, and it would just calm me right down. So that's one that's really handy and easy to use anywhere. Now, I do want to just mention again, the critical piece is to stop and start with the left nostril. That calms us down. A little aside, if you're having a day when you're really tired and exhausted and you want to energize, you can do that same technique, starting and stopping with the right nostril. And that will actually energize, but in a very calming way. So instead of caffeine, which can get us really energized and jacked up, alternate nostril breathing with the right nostril, all that does, it engages the sympathetic nervous system. So it's a subtle way of getting us into energizing. Okay. And there's a comment in chat about breathing definitely seems to help ground me, though haven't done alternate nostril breathing, simply deep breathing. Yes, and awesome. And that's exactly what we're going to get into next, or a slight variation of that. So again, we're going to be breathing through our nose. So if anybody needs to go clear out their nose, you're welcome to do that now. And I'm going to ask everyone to just close your eyes or soften your gaze. And in this moment, just notice what your breath is like. Not trying to control it or do anything in particular, simply notice. Maybe you notice how your inhale compares to your exhale. Where in your body that breath is traveling. Notice the length of your inhale and the length of the exhale. Is one longer than the other, or are they about the same? And now begin to lengthen your exhale, making it just a bit longer than your inhale. And if your breath is shallow, you may try breathing into the small of your back. And if you want a deeper experience, make your lips into an O or purse your lips as you exhale. But make sure to keep your cheeks engaged. So we don't want to get chipmunk cheeks here. We don't want them to puff out. And when you feel ready, you can come back into present, just allowing your breath to find its own rhythm. And when you feel ready, if your eyes are closed, you can gently blink your eyes open. And check in now about how you're feeling. And if you feel inclined, you can type into chat, where are you on that 1 to 10? So we have someone who started, I think, at a 6, 7, is down to a 3. People have gone down a 4. Anyone else want to check in? You can private message, or if not, about how you're feeling. Are you calmer now than when we started the exercise? I think you're also starting to see how important it is to take that moment to rate your anxiety before and after, because that's another marker that helps bring us into the present and actually helps us to gauge where we are. A lot of anxiety comes from the stories we tell ourselves and just feeding that loop over and over again about what's going on. And we notice what's going on physically in our body, but we don't often express it out loud. And so then that kind of takes on a life of its own. So by actually taking a moment to focus and noticing, my breath is shallow, I feel like I can't breathe, or my head is going, my lips are dry, whatever it is that is your experience of anxiety, naming it and then rating it helps us to have a marker for, are we making improvement or not? Okay, so I see some comments in here about feeling more calm. Let's see. I have a question for later, but we'll take it now. I mean, if you have questions about any of these techniques, I feel like I went through the first 2 pretty quickly. I should have done them a little slower. So let's go back to these exercises and see what questions there are. Someone says that breathing definitely helps, but there's sometimes a struggle with exhale, feel like I'm running out of breath. Great. So when we do that, we're probably not really breathing in enough. So remember, I suggested breathing into the small of the back. That actually helps to bring the breath into the lower lungs. Our lungs actually have 4 different lobes in them, and most of us don't breathe into those lower lobes. Often there's a direction to breathe into your belly, but what I find is when most people are given that direction, they use their muscles to expand their belly, and there's not really more breath coming in. So that's why if you really focus on breathing into the low back, that seems to draw the breath deeper into the lungs. Earlier, I mentioned about babies breathing through their nose. Another tip about breathing, if you watch babies, one thing they don't do is suck in their gut. How many of us walk around sucking our gut in, right? Especially if you stand up, ooh, I want to look slimmer and trimmer. I'm going to suck that gut in. Well, guess what? When you do that, you're actually moving your diaphragm up. If your diaphragm is in an up position, breath, it doesn't have a place to go. It can't come down. So we actually need to release that belly button, let it all hang out, and then we can breathe better. And you're right, breathing deeper and allowing that inhale to come fully in will then empower us to fully exhale more. There are some really wonderful books out right now about breathing. It's become popular. It's the in thing now, is breathe. Breathe, it's the in thing. I think that should be a new tagline. And what those books talk about are different ways to breathe, and they focus a lot on extending that exhale. Another thing that I sometimes do is when I think I've exhaled all the way, I'll actually count maybe to 1 or 2 and exhale just that little bit more. Holding an exhale is another technique, and that can calm the system. I'm not a fan of holding inhales. I know that some people claim that that's another way to address it, but what I find is that holding an inhale will ramp up our system instead of calming it. Holding the exhale can actually calm the system, but that also depends on your personal circumstances. There are some people that if they hold the exhale, then they feel like they're gasping for air. And we never want to do that because that immediately ignites that fight or flight system. Okay, so we always want things to just be smooth and flowing. Great question. Any other questions about any of those techniques? So we did 3 different things there. And you're welcome to type in chat or take yourself off mute since we're a small group. We're all friends here. We're all Peace Corps family.
Sharon, is the when you talked about in the second exercise about that, like where you're plugging your part of your nostril and like the left, and it was very important to do the left first or the right first, depending on what your outcome is. That based on the neuro, or what was
that actually comes out of yoga. So that's more, so for those who don't know, I am an expert in neuroenergetics. I am also a yoga therapist, which is different from yoga classes. So therapeutic yoga actually does address specific issues, and it's usually customized for the person. There are some classes that practice this as well, because again, it's calming and we all need calming nowadays. So that in Sanskrit called Nadi Shodhana. But also if you want to Google it or YouTube it, alternate nostril breathing. Yeah. So that comes out of that yoga tradition.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. All right, if there are no other questions, then we will kind of shift gears a little bit and start talking about how to annihilate long-term anxiety. So these tips and techniques are ways that you can address something immediate. So again, we all have those worries, what's going to happen when I graduate? Am I going to find a job? How am I going to pay the rent until then? What if I have to move across the country and there's all this craziness with traveling? Those immediate things are issues that bring up anxiety that we can treat in a moment using these different techniques. but I'm going to go ahead and screen share now and talk a little bit more about how to address things long term. So how does long-term anxiety or chronic anxiety even develop? And let me check in. Can you all see my screen? Okay, great. So what happens is something happens. There's an event that happens that triggers anxiety. And hopefully some of you know what your triggers are, okay? We may or may not get over that whole event. And then another event happens. We may or may not address that completely, and another, and another, and another. And all these events keep happening. And we deal with them to some degree, or we think we're dealing with them to some degree. But what usually happens is that it takes between 10 and 30 years, we're talking decades, before symptoms become unbearable. And why is that? Because we have normalized anxiety in our society now. And that alone is super troubling. But we think that it's reasonable, and the average person doesn't sleep well, right? It's perhaps using some supplements or something else because they have this anxiety, because there are social pressures. And we just think that all of that is normal, that we're not sure about our decisions, we're not confident. And we think that this is the way everybody is. And how do we know that? Because we're plugging into social media. And it's like, well, yeah, everybody has that, of course. Not true. And that's not the way it is. But we wait because we think that this is reasonable and normal. And so after a couple of decades, the symptoms appear and they do become unbearable. Let me tell you, not sleeping properly for decades will take a huge toll on your health. And it's hard to notice that sometimes. So after a couple of decades, these symptoms become unbearable. And do you know what people do then? It's fascinating to me. They will wait anywhere between 30 days and a couple of years before they seek help. So we've waited a few decades for the symptoms to become unbearable, and then we'll wait another month, another couple of years. What's a couple more years, right? And then they seek help. And by that time, you're walking into your caregiver's office with such a long list of symptoms, it's nearly impossible to figure out what's really going on. And part of that is because symptoms build on other symptoms. You know what? Your engine in your car engine can go without an oil change for a period of time. But after a while, that bad oil is going to start to affect the other symptoms, right? And soon your engine is going to conk out, but we're not going to know, did it conk out because of the oil? Or was there something else in the transmission? Was it not firing? Is it actually your starter? It all feeds into something else, and our body is all connected. That the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, if that applies to you, it's all connected. And even within our physical, we have so many different systems. So is it your circulatory system? Is it your breathing system? Is it your nervous system? Your muscles, are they atrophying because you're not exercising? Or because there's something else going on that's like so dire, you're just not addressing anything else. So we have all these different pieces going on. And by the time we seek help, it's really kind of hard. Part of that is because this anxiety has become our new normal. So all these events that happen become the new normal. In order to annihilate, and again, we're not interested in just managing anxiety, because then it's still there and we're just handling it. We don't want to do that. We want to get rid of it. So the first thing we need to do is get the body into PNS, which stands for parasympathetic nervous system. That's our rest and digest system. Okay? You had some little experience of that today. So we started out being anxiety. Some people were like at a 7, and we got down to about a 3. Right? That's bringing us into this parasympathetic nervous system. We're calming down. Literally, after decades of living in anxiety, we forget what calm feels like in our bodies. So we have to start remembering, what does calm feel like? Once we remember, we have to repeat that with enough regularity to make that the new normal. And when that becomes the new normal, our symptoms begin to ease. Make sense? Okay, so that's the first step. Now notice a lot of that is physical. So we're getting our body to relax, and we're remembering what relaxation feels like. That's a connection to our brain and what's going on in the brain. And then we're going to keep repeating that so that there's, let's call it muscle memory. Okay. The next piece is we need to change the neural pathways. So neural pathways are what happen in our brain. So whether I'm walking around saying, oh my God, is Mary going to be upset with what I posted on Facebook? I hope I didn't make her mad at me. What if she's mad at me? What am I going to do? That's creating a neural pathway. Or the Olympic gymnast who says, I'm going to get this. I'm going to win the gold today. I'm going to go on the balance beam and I'm going to perform my routine to perfection. They're creating a neural pathway. Both of those things create neural pathways. And it's really important that we make a conscious choice of which pathways we're creating. So once we change those neural pathways, we have to reinforce the new pathways. So all of this information that I'm presenting now is part of this neuroenergetics. So neuroenergetics is changing what goes on in our bodies and then making a connection and changing what goes on in the brain. And one of the people I studied with says to reinforce the new pathways, you should do the following. For 10 seconds, 10 times per day, for 10 days in a row, say something positive. Pick one thing. Some people call it a mantra, just a positive message. I've actually been working with something recently about being an amazing athlete. Okay. And so that's what I say to myself, 10 seconds, 10 times a day, I'm an amazing athlete. And when I do that, I'm building those neural pathways. And one truth about our brain is that our body will step up and support what our brain tells us. So sometimes our brain is in charge, and we want to make sure that we're crafting a careful message so that our brain is sending the right messages to our body. So our body's going to support that thought. So we want to change the neural pathways and then reinforce those neural pathways. This pattern repeats, and this is how we get out of anxiety in a more permanent way, because then we have the feedback loop that's actually helping us to perform much better in our lives. And we're not worried about what Mary thinks about our post on Facebook. Make sense? Good. Comments. I see a comment in chat saying cognitive behavioral therapy is useful if you find yourself struggling with changing pathways. And the person is speaking from experience. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yes, changing those pathways, changing the behavior, and you know, it's a loop. They kind of go around and around. So if we change the behavior, yes, we can change the thoughts. Change the thoughts, change the behavior. They definitely go hand in hand. Most people find changing behavior a real struggle, and some people find changing the thoughts can be easier. Not only that, but like 10 seconds, 10 times a day, it's not a big commitment. I find when I first started doing that, I actually found an app and I set an alarm on my phone so that it would go off. I think I had it actually like once an hour. And so I knew I would have 10 waking hours in a day, and I could take 10 seconds 10 times a day. And if you want to do it more, it's okay too. And then, you know, I was building those neural pathways. So that's another nice thing. You could get an app or find something on your phone. Other questions or comments about this? taking a sideline from myself for a minute, talking about apps, there are also some really wonderful apps for breathing out there. So if you want to have an app that will help you breathe better, I can try and find the names and send them out. Jody, I don't know if you have a way to send out to everyone who's on here, but I know there was one I was using for a little while. It was really cute, and it would actually have like a smiley face that filled up when I was inhaling and exhaled and deflated when I was exhaling. And then there was one where you could actually customize and set your own pattern. So if you want to be inhaling and exhaling for a certain amount of time, I could set how many seconds I was going to inhale and exhale. So those can be really useful. Any other questions or comments about anything we've spoken about here? So you have the 3 techniques to address immediate anxiety. And then we have some ideas here about how to start addressing it in a long-term way. And even those immediate exercises, you can just use those on a really regular basis. And that will also start to help this process of annihilating the anxiety. And really, it is possible to get to a place where there is enough confidence and calm in the body that we don't have anxiety anymore. I mean, sure, there's going to be moments that come up, things here and there, and there's actually something that's useful anxiety. It's called eustress. It's a type of stress that we actually need sometimes to propel us to take action, but we don't want to hang on to it, and we don't want it long term. So the last piece I'm going to put up here is, again, my name is Sharon. And as Jody mentioned, I was really happy to share this information because this is part of what I do. And I really want to start getting this out there more. I want people to not have anxiety. And particularly my Peace Corps family, I know that we're dealing with a lot of anxiety. People were taken out of country. People come home and it's like, oh my God, how do I integrate? They have like flushing toilets. What's that all about? You know, and it's like, I remember when I came home, I went to a shopping mall and I saw this big kiosk and you had to like take a map to navigate your way around the shopping mall. I literally walked right out. I'm like, this is too complicated. Where I was in Peace Corps, there was one road from my village to the next village, and that's it. I need a map to get through the shopping mall. This is crazy, right? So I know that we have a lot of stresses coming home. And then as people have written, you know, we go back into school, we're trying to find out what's our next career, what's our next move, and that's really hard. So I really want to be available for my Peace Corps family. You can see on the slide is my link for a Calendly. Anytime you want to schedule something and have a brief chat, we can talk about what is going on for you. I'm just going to put that in chat as well, so you have it more accessible. I'm always happy to talk to Peace Corps family, and if folks want to schedule something and we can talk about what's going on and maybe even do the exercises together. Sometimes it's helpful to have someone to do it with you the first couple of times and get you to that calmer place. I think some other comments came up in chat. Question, are the mantras supposed to be things you already believe or things you don't believe about yourself or something you need to remind yourself? Excellent. The mantras can be whatever it is you need to work on most. So there can be times when if you're struggling to be in the present moment, then I think a mantra can be something that brings you into the moment, the same way we did, you know, what I see here, etc. For me, again, I'm using one right now. I'm an amazing athlete. I personally don't really believe that, but it's funny because I get feedback sometimes that other people see me as athletic. So, you know, our view of ourselves is really different from other people's views. So it can be something that you're working on. It can, in terms of like something that you don't believe about yourself, that's a little bit trickier. And I think that requires a little more custom talking through, because it depends how far away you are from that and the kind of person you are as to whether you're really working on that or not. Not to belittle it, and to take an example that's like really extreme. So if I'm going to say, I'm a fairy princess, I'm a fairy princess, I'm a fairy princess, I'm probably not going to end up being like a Disney princess, but there could be that person out there that's going to work their way into the royal family and marry someone so they can darn well be a royal princess. So again, I know that's a really silly example. It depends on the kind of person you are and the stretch that you have with that thing that you're believing yourself. You know, if you're just trying to get to the next step, which is where I usually like to see those kinds of mantras, that's something that I think will have greater success with. You know, usually in life, we often want to skip steps and we think we're going to go from here to somewhere else. Here's another silly but real life example. So when I first came into coaching, I would often have on my to-do list something like, I'm going to meet with Joan next week. And what I came to learn was like, I have no idea what Joan's schedule is. That's a really dumb goal that's setting me up for failure, because if I say I'm going to meet with Joan, there are actually a whole lot of steps that need to happen before I can meet with Joan. I need to find out what her schedule is. I need to contact her. Like, there are steps in between. So we need to make sure we're taking the next smallest step. And setting ourselves up for success is another piece I'm passionate about. And I learned that by refining that process and saying, you know, I'm going to contact Joan with the intention to find out when she's available to meet. That is really different from saying I'm going to meet with Joan. And even though it's a really small difference, being able to check that off my to-do list for me is huge. I'm the kind of person that, well, I have to have all those check marks to feel satisfied and to feel really good about myself. And to me, at the end of the day, when I see stuff checked off my list, I feel good. If I see more things on my list and nothing got checked off, that's going to raise my anxiety. Great question. Other questions or comments? You can chat, you can unmute yourself, whatever works. All right, Jody, why don't you go ahead? I'm going to stop sharing. If you want to take over, you probably have some announcements and can let us know about other workshops that are upcoming.
Thank you. I think really more than anything, I just wanted to thank you, and thank you for taking your time and sharing of your time and your energy with your Peace Corps family in this way. You know what you're talking about. It's great to hear some of these. I know I learned some new things, and I'll definitely try to implement those to help with anxiety when it does come up. So I really appreciate you being here and for your kind offer to chat with folks if they do have follow-up questions as well. If there are other questions from the audience, this is the last chance, really, and you can certainly just unmute and ask if you have questions. You can always check out, of course, our calendar of events at peacecorpsconnect.org/events, and that will have all of what's coming up. There's some fun things on career planning next week, and there's going to be a refugee in our podcast. We're going to be focused on refugee and resettlement career opportunities, which should be a really interesting and fun one as well to participate in. So there's lots of things. You can always just check our calendar for what's coming up, and this will of course be posted, so you can certainly go back and watch this if you wanted eventually. If you do have any follow-up questions or on where you can find these things, obviously always reach out to me as well. You can certainly reach me at jody@peacecorpsconnect.org. So any final questions by anyone, or are we at the point where we will let Sharon go and get back to her work and everyone else get back to their Friday fun, right? Fun Friday. All right. Thanks everyone for coming, and make it a great day and a great weekend.